Chairman of the January 6th committee says that the panel will not make any criminal referrals when it comes to President Trump. But that claim quickly contradicted by Congressman Adam Schiff and GOP Congresswoman Liz Cheney. The committee held its second hearing of this cycle of 7 yesterday. There was one last year. Joining me now, former federal prosecutor, Fox News contributor Andy McCarthy. Andy, what do you make of this back and forth about a criminal referral? How do you see it?
I think it's what James Toronto used to call a kerfuffle. I think people misunderstand, Dagan, what a criminal referral is and how meaningful it is to the Justice Department. A referral is when Congress notifies the Justice Department that it believes it's found evidence of a crime, and the Justice Department takes it and says, thank you very much, and then they decide whether there's evidence of a crime or not. And the argument between the members of the committee that broke out last night, as I understand it, is whether they would formally send something over that says, we believe Donald Trump committed a crime, or whether they would simply send a document that says, here's what Donald Trump did. So it's like the difference between sending over, Andy robbed the bank, you should prosecute him, versus if they send over, let me tell you what Andy did yesterday. He drove up to the bank and went in with a gun, So it makes no difference to the Justice Department. They're going to look at it, and they're going to see what other evidence they have or what other evidence they can develop, and then they'll make a decision, and it won't have the fact that Congress recommended it or didn't recommend it won't make a whit of difference to a good prosecutor.
It's not a trial either.
Right.
As you being a prosecutor, this is not a trial.
Nope. I mean, it's not even a normal congressional hearing in the sense that all perspectives are not represented, right? So nominally, it's a bipartisan committee because two of the members are Republicans. But the Republican leadership in the House was denied the ability to put its own chosen members on the committee. And the one credential that cuts across party lines for being on the committee is to be, to find Trump loathsome and to be determined to try to make a criminal case on Trump. And I'm not saying, look, that's not an irrational perspective. All I'm saying is that in a normal adversarial proceeding, like even when I tried terrorists in the 1990s, we gave the terrorist a lawyer. We gave them an opportunity to appear in court. They got to make their own defense. You don't have anything really like that on this committee.
Indeed. And it also kind of the juxtaposition between this and being, again, this riot was condemned forcefully and quickly, instantaneously by not just people on the left, not just Democrats, but people across the spectrum and people on the right and Republicans far and wide condemned it. But when you have this going on and the outrage over this riot and these House Democrats completely ignoring the attempted assassination of Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh, here's the White House on that yesterday. Listen to this.
We have condemned it, the president has, and we will continue to do so. Any intimidation or threats against judges is something that we take very seriously.
Joe Biden has not condemned that assassination attempt. The House has yet, Nancy Pelosi, to move on this Senate bill to provide additional protection to the Supreme Court justices' families and to ensure their safety. Meantime, you got pro-abortion protesters returning to Associate Justice Samuel Alito's Virginia home. And the House is dragging its feet on this security bill. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell saying that any changes made in the House to this bill could doom the legislation. Again, they care about one type of violence, but they sure as hell don't care about an assassination attempt and threats to Supreme Court justices. Andy.
Well, I think it could be worse than that, Dagan. I mean, sometimes the simplest answer is the answer, right? The most logical one. why did the leaked opinion by Justice Alito get leaked in the first place? To precipitate exactly the sort of thing that we're seeing. Why is it happening? Because they don't like the opinion. They don't like the prospect of Roe being overruled. So they're trying to intimidate the justices who are on that majority to change their vote. And the reason they're not taking any curative action about all this outrageous behavior that you just described is they hope it works. I mean, that's what they're trying to accomplish. I don't mean to be flip about it or to laugh about it, but it puzzles me that people look at this and say, what are they doing here? Why are they doing this when it's completely obvious why they're doing it?
And Andy, you talk about intimidation, but given what we've seen, you've got 9 justices. And if one died, if one was assassinated, where does that leave the Democrats? The Wall Street Journal wrote sort of about that it's, you talk about, it's unthinkable, but you have an assassination plot foiled, and you have the Democrats doing, in the House, Nancy Pelosi doing a whole lot of nothing to ensure the protection of them.
Right. Well, look, until a decision comes out, there's no decision, right? So if you have a 9-member court, it's one thing. If it's an 8-member court, it's a different thing. Right. Nobody wants to talk about this. I don't want to talk about this. But, obviously, given what happened with Justice Kavanaugh last week, we have to talk about it. And for the White House to come out and say, we condemn intimidation, there's a federal statute that says that you can't protest on the homes, at the residences of justices of the United States, not just Supreme Court justices, not even digging just judges. It's, witnesses, members of the jury. And it's because we're supposed to protect judicial proceedings and keep them insulated from political pressure. They're not enforcing that statute.
Andy McCarthy, great to see you. Measured,
Thanks,
thoughtful, brilliant, always. Andy, thank you.